So my name is Glenn Ahrens. I'm the OSU Extension Forester for Clackamas County, also Marion and Hood River counties. And I'm working as part of our OSU Extension team statewide, and we've been really working on this Fire Aware, Fire Prepared program. We started with a series of webinars statewide covering really all aspects of understanding fire and being prepared for fire, what to do before, during, and after fires, and how our systems work. But our goal here tonight is really to provide more of the local connections for you here in Clackamas County. And you'll meet a lot of different folks here tonight on this webinar from the different emergency management and fire management and protection, as well as other folks that have good examples of how to help prepare their homes and communities for fire. So I'm hoping that if you haven't had a chance that you'll go back and look at some of the webinars that we did earlier, and we are going to provide a lot of resources, the links to those sites. One thing I wanted to say before we really get started, we're covering a lot of aspects of fire and fire preparedness. And of course, fire is a pretty scary thing. And many of us here, went through a lot last year. So I just want to recognize that, these fires have affected most all of us here. Some of us had to evacuate. Some of you may have lost everything, certainly well dealt with unhealthy smoke for many days. And now here we are in the middle of another bad fire season. And so I speak for all of us here tonight and in the program for OSU Extension, just to say we're sorry for these impacts that fire is having. But that's partly why we're here, is to help be prepared. Acknowledge that this recovery from last year is ongoing, and the new fires this year are stressing us out. There was a brush fire not far from me the other day, and I hear the sirens and smell the smoke when I woke up early. It sort of triggered a feeling of, oh no, here we go again. So our program tonight is likely to stir up some feelings and some anxiety. Perhaps I want to acknowledge this with respect and with understanding. And if needed, you might want to step away or distance yourself from that. All we can do is start from where we are and take steps towards our goals in fire preparedness. And we're here to share information and learn together about the steps that we can take to be more prepared, to help ourselves, to help our communities deal with this threat of wildfire. So with that, ready to kind of launch the next part of the program. So we've got a series of panelists coming up here, and I wanted to introduce our first panelist. Before I do that, I didn't advance my slides. So I mentioned the Fire Aware, Fire Prepared program, and definitely a starting portal for that you'll get in an email afterwards is our Extension Fire site. And as I mentioned, what our goals are here is really to connect you with local resources and provide some good examples to help you be ready to start working in your neighborhood and starting with where you live. So with that, I'm ready to introduce Alan Fitzpatrick. You are there, Alan. Go ahead and turn your video and audio on.
There we go. Can you hear and see me now? Yeah,
I can hear you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Glenn. Thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for coming out tonight and sharing in this session with us as we share information. Again, my name is Alan Fitzpatrick. I work with the Office of the State Fire Marshal, and my job is to be a regional mobilization coordinator. This is a new position that our office has added under the Response Ready Oregon initiative that the legislature enacted back in January. They've made our jobs permanent through new legislation and have added some capacity to our office, which allows us to work with the local fire agencies a little more closely. I want to talk to you with you a little bit tonight, kind of about how an emerging and an expanding incident in Oregon works. All emergencies start and end locally. So Glenn, if you could advance to the next slide there, that kind of shows our graphic of how we respond to wildfire here in the state of Oregon. So that local jurisdiction having authority, whether it be a fire district or a municipal fire department, will receive that 911 call, and they'll come out and they'll begin the response. You're going to hear from some of our local partners about how best they do that. And then we have mutual aid agreements through our counties. So many of our counties have a county-wide mutual aid agreement where where those local jurisdictions share resources with one another. Oftentimes they're auto-aided, so they just get dispatched to the fire as they're needed. That incident commander can just call for the next set of resources and they begin to arrive. Then we have an expanded mutual aid agreements. They go into other counties and perhaps through our partners like ODF, Oregon Department of Forestry has firefighting resources, and so do some of the federal agencies that are on the borders of some of our local jurisdictions. And then we get to statewide mutual aid. There's a couple of different ways we can do this. One way is through immediate response. The other way is through the Conflagration Act. The Conflagration Act is something that is enacted by the governor. So that local fire defense board chief of that county, so the county fire defense board chief there in Clackamas County, Chief Davis, would get a hold of our office or myself and let us know that, hey, we have an emerging incident that's expanding beyond the resources that we have locally. We've exhausted local resources, mutual aid resources, extended mutual aid resources. Now we need help from other fire agencies within the state. We run that up to the governor's office. They sign that Conflagration Act and it comes back down. And then we're able to mobilize resources from throughout the state to come help out with this project or this fire. And typically we get overhead teams when that happens. We get incident management teams and middle management folks that help us with a span of control, make sure that we're taking care of firefighter safety, public safety. We usually unify command and have all kinds of other great partners involved, whether it be the local law enforcement, county law enforcement, state law enforcement, as well as some of the other folks like emergency management, public works, the utilities. Lots of folks get involved when we get into a large incident like that. And then we can also go to intrastate mutual aid, or what we call EMAC, which is a compact that is signed by emergency management organizations, and they allow us to bring resources from outside the state into the state to help us fight fire. Currently, I talked to you about these large incidents and large incident management teams. So the Oregon Office of the State Fire Marshal has 3 Type 2 teams. There's really 5 levels, one being the largest organization with the most responsibility. So we have 3 Type 2 teams. The Oregon Department of Forestry has 3 Type 1 teams. And then within the Northwest, which is Oregon and Washington, there's a coordination center, and they have access to 2 more Type 1 teams and 9 Type 2 teams. So we have a lot of immediate access to high-level management that is trained and used to working on these large, complex incidents and blending a variety of resources from the wildland side, from the industrial side of our forest managers and landowners, as well as the Oregon Fire Mutual Aid System, or the local jurisdictions that have authority that are really responsible for structure protection most of the time. We also operate in an area we call WUI, which you guys are probably familiar with. If not, hopefully by the end of the night you will be. That's the wildland urban interface area, and that's really the concern for us. Right now, today on the landscape in Oregon, we have 4 large fires currently burning, and we have many, many other fires burning that are being managed by Type 3 teams or local teams. So they haven't gone to that state, or they've been big fires, we've got them contained, and now they're in a mop-up or patrol mode. Today, or as of July 26th in Oregon, we've had 1,062 wildfires on our landscape. It's burned nearly 600,000 acres already this year in Oregon. The Oregon off-mass, that fire mutual aid system I talked about, we deploy task forces. Usually there's 5 rigs in a task force and then a leadership role. So there's really 6 vehicles, 5 for firefighting and 1 in command and control. And so far this year, we've deployed 29 task forces from around Oregon onto these 6 large conflagration fires that we've had already. We've had 2 task forces from Utah, which is about 13 firefighting rigs. We've had 6 from Washington, and we've had 4 strike teams from California. And currently there's a team from Alaska checking into the Bootleg fire to take over that fire as resources become fatigued, we change them out every couple of weeks and give them a rest period so that they don't become fatigued and make poor decisions. That's all built into our system and kind of how that works. So one of the things I'd like to kind of introduce to you tonight and stress to you is, as you listen to the rest of these folks talk, they're going to talk a lot about prevention. We talk about it from the response side. So there's the big picture on response and how it works. I can tell you that if you guys, as landowners, as folks who live on the property and live on the landscape, do a great job of prepping things for us, it really helps. One of the first things our firefighters do when we get to a large scale incident in the WUI environment is we go through and we triage all those structures, and we decide we make some objective decisions very quickly about whether or not a structure is defendable, whether or not we can prep and defend that structure, or if that structure can stand alone. Is it prepped well enough that we can do a few things and then go on to the next structure? And once we get everything triaged and we've done all the work, then we can go direct attack on that fire. So the more work that you can do up front, the more prevention that you can do for us, it gives us the opportunity to more quickly engage and do some direct fire attack with more of our resources. We're always going to put resources onto direct fire attack, but we also put resources into the structure triage and structure protection mode as well. So anyway, that's what I have to talk about tonight. I really appreciate your time. Appreciate the time tonight, Glenn, and the rest of the panelists. And if there's any information I can share, please don't hesitate to reach out after the fact as well.
Very good. Thank you, Alan. I'm glad you could spare the time for us. And that really kind of puts it in perspective for how fire response works. And really our goal is to share this, to provide some good examples, to connect you with the local folks. So you're going to meet some of the fire, more like local fire district folks here coming up. But it's really important for you to figure out kind of who is your local fire department as well. So we'll talk about that later. Well, Jay, I don't see any particular questions for you. Oh,
Glenn?
Yes.
One just came in through the chat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I'll recognize in the background, we have Amanda Brenner helping out. She's actually primary coordinator of this whole event here, and she'll be minding the chat. So a question for you, Jay, Alan, is how large is a typical conflagration once it's been declared?
Yeah, that's a, oops, sorry about that. Yeah, so conflagrations can kind of go in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes it's just the base overhead team, which is about 8 to 10 folks, all the way up to our overhead teams are usually closer to 30. And we can have one structure task force, which is, like I said, usually 5 rigs and a command rig, all the way up to, at one point on bootleg, I believe we had 7 task forces all at the same time working that fire. So they can be they can expand and contract as we need in order to really go after the structure protection piece. So that's really the Oregon Office of the State Fire Marshal really works closely in unified command with our partners in the wildfire areas to protect structures. So whatever we need to do that. So I wish there was an easy average for you, but there's not. It usually starts with a couple. That initial resource order is an overhead team and 2 or 3 strike teams or task forces, and then it expands from there depending on the need.
All right. Well, thank you, Alan. I think we'll move on, and you need to go to your next thing. So glad you can make it tonight. And he's provided his contact, and you'll have that as well in case you have questions for Alan later. So very good. You're welcome. All right. Well, next, I'd like to introduce Amanda Rao. So in our extension program, mentioned our ongoing fire education programs, and we've really beefed up our attention to fire and helping folks prepare. And Amanda is our regional fire specialist, and she's going to come on and tell you more about what she does and how she can help us prepare more kind of at the big picture here. So Amanda Rao, are you there?
As Glenn said, my name is Amanda Rao, and I'm a regional fire specialist for Oregon State University Extension Services new fire program. We just got up and running last year, and we're housed within the Forestry and Natural Resources program. So that's the same program that Glenn works for. And it was funded in the legislature, through the legislature in 2019, and then implemented in 2020. We have a state fire program manager, that's Kari, and then we have 6 regional specialists that cover the entire state. What's unique about our program is that prior to it being established, there wasn't service in this realm throughout the state. So ODF covers certain areas, there's fire departments that cover certain areas. But as far as the education and outreach was concerned, some communities had that going on and others didn't. So this is really fulfilling a need across the state for all Oregonians. And so the specialists who are assigned to the various parts of the state were established based on some analytical work that was done to look at how fires burn across the landscape and then map that out. And so 4 of the folks were hired on last fall, and then 2 of them are hired on early this year in the winter time. And, you know, our program really got staffed right after these Labor Day fires had happened, which of course made a really interesting start to the job. And we immediately were responding to the need for post-fire recovery and assistance with information for landowners about how to put in for funding, checklists to use when returning to their property that would help them be able to apply for funds for some of the recovery work, as well as a wonderful story map, which you can find online, and that will be provided in the resources as well, to navigate and learn more about how these fires burn. We did a series of webinars called After the Fire, and we're really able to engage and kind of help communities out. We wish that the program had been around longer so that maybe we could have helped folks prepare for these events more, but now we're doing that work. And so that led right into Fire Aware, Fire Prepared, which is part of what you are all here for today. And the Wildfire Wednesdays were really intended to help folks think through what they can do as we enter into fire season this year differently than maybe last year, knowing more now that we know about what fires can do under some of these extreme conditions. But kind of getting more generally to what the program was intended for, aside from some of the work that we've done in response to the 2020 Labor Day fires, involve identifying landscapes that are in the highest need of strategic focus, and then contributing to cross-boundary landscape scale projects that really get work done on the ground. That's the goal. And that's really kind of a boundary spanning type of work where we bring different parties together to try to help them work across their boundaries, because we know fire doesn't really care about ownership. It does care about what's been done on the land. And so if people can work together to make those treatments really sync up, then we have a better chance at being fire adapted and resilient. And then just providing education and outreach opportunities, which of course, you know, that's what we're doing here today, is a huge part of our program. So all specialists have been engaged in a variety of different kinds of work, and that also includes education materials for prescribed fire, as well as mitigation training and other forms of learning for us to get as good at what we're doing as possible in order to serve our publics better. My background is primarily in fire operations, so if anyone has questions about terminology on wildfires or what happens in response, you know, I'm a good person to ask. But I have also a primary background in prescribed fire and ecological management of fire. So my hope is that I can help us all sort of move towards a better relationship with fire by you know, engaging where we can reasonably to use it, whether it's pile burning or landscape level prescribed fire. That kind of work can really make a big difference in the end. But that ranges all the way into other forms of fuels management, including mechanical work, which is often what we end up doing. And on the west side of Oregon, and especially Northwest Oregon, we have a more challenging landscape to work on for many different reasons, including photosynthesis being quite successful and vegetation just growing really well here. So, so we have maintenance issues that we have to address and things that we have to do in our own way here. And that's really why this whole concept of having regional specialists works really well. So I hope that if anyone here has questions or needs or interest in learning more, they'll feel free to reach out to me. And I appreciate the opportunity to contribute today. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, and as Amanda said, you can reach her and us through the contacts through the Extension Service. And we're now going to the next stage of this, which is more our local fire districts. So I would invite Scott Kline and Gregg Ramirez and Kari to come on board here. Kari Shanklin, if you're ready to turn your video and your audio on.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Scott, Gregg, very good. Now I do have the slideshow for Gregg, but why don't we just start introducing yourselves? I'll start with you, Scott.
I'm Scott Kline. I'm the fire marshal at Hoodland Fire District. We cover the east end of the county going up towards Mount Hood.
Okay, very good, Scott. And then Gregg, are you there?
I am. Good evening. I'm Gregg Ramirez. I'm the emergency manager for Clackamas Fire.
All right, and Kari.
My name is Kari Shanklin, and I am a deputy fire marshal with Clackamas Fire District Number 1.
All right, and so we're really here to learn about more, how folks can connect with their local fire jurisdictions, what you can do for them, and your role in prevention and preparedness. So let's just get started with that conversation. And Gregg, I guess you want to kick that off, and then Scott, you might just tag team with Gregg if something occurs to you that you'd like to add.
Absolutely. So I wanted to take a look at, just communicate with everybody what the fire district is doing to prepare themselves to be more successful for future fires. We really learned a lot from last year, and we've taken aggressive steps to change the way we do business. And also we've done some great work in the community to help spread the message and just really be that front line for information as well as fighting fires head on. Next slide, please. So I think we're all familiar with the statistics. The Riverside Fire did a lot of damage, 138,000 acres, lost 139 buildings. Thank goodness we didn't have any loss of life. 4 people were injured, and the cause of that fire was considered to be human caused. Next slide, please. Next fire. I want to see the next fire. So this is a term that I've seen in emergency management circles, and I'm sure that you've run across it as well. We're talking about fires being mega fires now, which I think is an interesting term. It's a scary thing to think that the fires are growing in the future based on the climate change, based on vegetation changes, and just all the factors that go together, making these fires into what's now being referred to as mega fires. And I think it's staggering to see the amount of damage that's possible in the future. So I think the steps that programs like this are absolutely needed, and I think they're very much welcomed. Next slide, please. So the fire district, after our experiences in 2020, we reached out. We really wanted to not only take an internal look, we wanted to have somebody from the outside look at the way we did business, look at the way we approached the fires, and we engaged participation from the Western Fire Chiefs Association. They came in and did an after-action review, took an in-depth look at every facet of our business, and made some recommendations. We've been reacting to those. Some of the things that we've done is we're standing up incident management teams to take a more organized approach, a more focused approach, and just really, I think, manage our resources better than we have in the past. We will be standing up 2 fire operation centers, a primary and a secondary. This is new to the fire district. It's going to change the way we do business. I think that we're going to have leadership play leadership roles, and frontline people play frontline roles, and really designate those differences. I think that we found, and we have some awesome leadership. I think we need to empower them and put them in situations and positions where they can better manage our situations. We also have an incredible workforce of some very talented people, but day in and day out, when it's an all hands on deck situation, we're looking at ways that we can incorporate our support staff members into the actual fight. They did some awesome things during this last event, And we found that if we do some better planning, some better organization, I think they can be a real force multiplier. And I think they're going to be definitely a game changer for us. One organization that really stood up and proved themselves to be just that, a force multiplier, was our community emergency response team. They did heroic work. And so we're growing that program, and we're doing some more training. We're doing getting them more involved in the operations side of things. And I think that we're going to definitely be more effective because of it. One of the other things that we're doing is, based on where we live, we've got a lot of folks with a lot of talents, a lot of heavy equipment, and a lot of capabilities. We found during this last event, we really didn't have a mechanism to engage them, employ them, and use them. And it was frustrating for us, frustrating for them. And so right now we're developing a resource list, and we're going to look at ways that we can actively engage those people with those talents and equipment to help us meet the needs that come up. One of the most inventive things that, and most, I think, just showed a great deal of ingenuity is our standing up what we're calling Crew 330. This is an interesting partnership between the Department of Labor, the Clackamas Community College, and Clackamas Fire. But this is a group of people that were unemployed or underemployed, and now we're having them gainfully employed. We've taught them firefighting skills, and they've already been deployed to a couple of events, and have proven themselves to be professional and just really just an asset that we can rely on. And I think that we'll definitely be using them more and more as we move forward. The bottom picture there is, I know some people get excited when they see a picture of a Corvette. For whatever reason, that's what really gets me excited. These big, robust apparatus. So this is one that we purchased. It has just an amazing set of capabilities for that first initial fire attack. And so we've really put our money where our mouth is. I think it demonstrates our commitment to hitting these fires head on. And this piece of apparatus is going to definitely play a huge role in our ability to attack those fires. And then one of the most important things I think we're doing is increasing our public outreach. Kari's going to speak to you about her work, and I think she's doing heroic things based on the environment that we're in with so much interface. There's just so many opportunities to help stem and quell the impacts and consequences of fires through good public outreach and education. Next slide, please. So this is some of the things that we're asking the public to do. Well, number one, first and foremost, is to listen to Kari's messages. She's definitely been a force for good and making definite changes. She's going to speak to you about some of her programs that I know are making a difference. And again, because of the amount of interface that we have in our county, it's vitally important. But these are the things that, from an emergency management standpoint, that we're really trying to get out there in the public, and really taking a grassroots effort or approach to educating people about making a plan. So many people were caught off guard, and they didn't, with places to go, places to move their equipment to, or their livestock. And so we're asking people to make a plan, and we're carrying that message forward with examples and education and training. Of course, we're asking people to be 2 weeks ready. One of the biggest things we're asking people to do is have a go bag. It's simple things to help people in an emergency just be really prepared to get out and be safe and more comfortable when they have to leave their homes in short order. One of the biggest things that we learned, I think, was a lesson learned for me was pets. Number of shelters are now taking pets, which is an improvement, but we're really trying to push the message that if you take your pets with you, you have to really think through all those wraparound services, their food, their medications, because although the shelter that these individuals might find themselves in, although they might take pets, they very infrequently have those support things that people will need for their pets. And then, of course, given the area that we live in, we have lots of people with lots of livestock. And a lot of great folks really stepped forward this last time to make their properties available. People did amazing things. It was really neighbors helping neighbors. But now we're working more closely with those sites and organizations so that we have a more seamless way of connecting with them, a more seamless way of moving livestock in short order when we need to. That's become a real big issue. So we've been lucky in the past, but we're looking to improve the way we do that. Next slide, please. So we're asking people to have that go bag, trying to get across to people that it's nothing but an overnight bag. But just thinking through that, what do I need? What'll be important to me? And what do I need to be, what do I need when I'm away from home to be healthy, safe, and then also better connected? We're asking people to have their contact list, their important papers, things of that nature, but in a way that they can just grab and go when necessary. Next slide, please. And we share this list with them. I think that might be it. Next slide, please. Certainly happy to answer your questions. Clackamas Fire, I'm real proud of the work that everybody's doing. We really have no shortage of people who are willing and ready to step forward, get out of their comfort zones and step away from their usual work detail to chip in and help. I'm encouraged by the steps that our new fire chief, Nick Brown, is taking. And I have every confidence that we're going to be able to meet the mission in the future as these fires continue to occur in our area.
All right, thank you, Gregg. And there are a lot of questions coming in the Q&A, and we're going to be managing those as we can through each of the segments here, and also at the end. And I should point out that since there's so many folks and there's a lot of important questions, we're going to hang around and keep answering questions, even if we go a little over time. At this point, I'd ask if Scott has anything he wants to add from Hoodland Fire to what Gregg's talking about, and I might stimulate the conversation with some questions of my own.
Just kind of looking through people's questions, how to prepare your home. The biggest thing is defensible space. Everybody hears that term, defensible space. What is defensible space? The biggest thing that you can do there is within 30 feet of your home is just clearing the dead down stuff. Doesn't mean you need to clear cut, remove all brush. Just get the dead down stuff at least 30 feet away from your home. That's the primary, what we call a primary zone area. Limb up your trees a little bit, keep what we call ladder fuels, which allows the fire to go from the ground up into the tree canopy. That's where we see these big mega fires happen, is the fire ends up going into the canopy, and then we get what they call a running crown fire, which basically just incinerates everything in its path. It's usually a wind-driven event. Fires do create their own winds as they get hotter and hotter. And you may have seen on the news over the past couple weeks that they've talked about the fires creating their own weather patterns. Another one that I've come across question-wise is, what do fire districts, or who can come out and look at my property and give me tips on what to do for fire prevention or for defensible space? I can't talk for all fire districts in that, but here in the Hoodland corridor, people just need to either email myself or give me a phone call at the fire district. And I am glad to go out, give tips on how to make your homes fire safe, how to prepare for fire. I also, if you want, I can go in, I can do just home safety inspection, making sure that smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors are placed right, that you have a working fire extinguisher, and just making your home a safer place. Other than that, with Hoodland Fire, we're kind of that frontier area where We actually do a lot of mutual aid with the Oregon Department of Forestry, as well as the U.S. Forest Service. Actually, we do have homes that are on Forest Service property, but the homes are private homeowners. And so we have a tiered response where all three agencies will go out to wildland fires, and then we will fight the fire up to a certain point, and kind of who's ever fired is, then they take over control. If they want to keep us there, they are allowed to keep us for a certain amount of time. And then beyond that, then they have to start paying for the resources to be there. Other than that, I do not have too much else.
Yeah, and actually, each fire district, has a little bit different capability. And so that's one important thing for all of us, is to kind of get familiar with what our fire district does. And if they're not able to come out, for instance, and look at your driveway or look at your house or your defensible space, there are other folks in line that can do that. In fact, we share a lot of that amongst all of us here. We want to make sure that you get some help that you need. And, like for instance, in Clackamas district, Gregg, who, if people call Clackamas Fire, can they get someone to come out and in good time and help take a look at their situation?
Absolutely. I'm going to let Kari address that. She definitely has a robust program.
Yeah, why don't we go to Kari from here, and then we're going to keep handling the Q&A as we go through tonight. But Kari, why don't you come on here?
Okay, that sounds really good. And I can start out with that question. I probably in the last couple of days, we've had maybe 5 or 10 requests to come out and do kind of a risk assessment or a home assessment. And it's almost just offering people suggestions, like what, almost just a reassurance for them. And so we're happy to do that. And you can just call the main line for Clackamas Fire, or we have a pretty active website, and there's a place for questions, and they will get you through to the right people. But the other part that I was going to talk about is just what I'm big in. My name is Kari Shanklin, and I'm a deputy fire marshal, and my job is to do outreach and fire prevention. And so if you want to go ahead and put the slide up that I had sent, that would be great. One of the things that when the wildfires occurred in the fall of 2020, a lot of people felt very compelled to donate to the Clackamas Emergency Services Foundation. And they wanted to help wildfire victims, but also a portion of the money that they donated was intended to go toward fire prevention. How can we not have a fire incident like we did in the fall? How can we not have that happen again? And so there has been a very active campaign called the Ready, Set, Go campaign. It's a national program that focuses on 3 steps, kind of before, during, and really during a wildfire. And so we did in May a campaign that we created a public safety video that's available on our website that talks about what to do, just kind of the ready part and the set part and the go part of the Ready, Set, Go program. And essentially it's when Scott was talking about the defensible space, if you can see kind of that center photo on the slide, the first zone, the 30 feet within your house, making sure there's very limited combustibles that close, limbing up trees, making sure they're spaced out, making sure your wood pile is not close to your house. Just that 30-foot zone of kind of a very safe zone around your house. And then each zone further out, maybe not as manicured, but just kind of still eliminating ladder fuels. And then who knew that we would have such an intense fall with wildfires, and then an ice storm that was so devastating in Clackamas County that happened in the winter. And so now people have the situation with so much debris on the ground, and then another, kind of what's starting out to be maybe a dangerous, wildfire situation that we're approaching. So what the Emergency Services Foundation agreed to was creating a chipper grant program. We researched a whole bunch of successful programs. The city of Sandy has just a great chipper program where they actually have their own chipper, but that was not very feasible for such a large fire district. But what we wanted people to do was to be able to take measures to make their property more defensible, but by utilizing their own fortitude and their own, what they wanted to work on. And so the Emergency Services Foundation funded $500 chipper grants, and it has been such a well-received program. So the basics of the program are: you go to the clackamasfire.com website, and kind of in the middle of the page, there's a Ready, Set, Go tab, and you click on that, and then you go off kind of to the side. There's a wood chipper grant program, and it's a chipper grant program, but it's also a fuels reduction program. You click on that, and then it's a drop down fillable form, and it asks you for your name and address, what type of a date would be good for a site visit. We do a site visit. We're very responsible with the funds from the Clackamas Emergency Services Foundation, and we just want to make sure that where people aren't misusing the funds. And so we will send someone out to do a site visit. I have been to numerous site visits, and at every single one of them, they have so much debris. They've got piles. Some it's almost overwhelming, what they're trying to do. But then this little chipper grant program has allowed them to at least get started. A lot of the services, are going to be a little more expensive than just, the $500 limit, but it at least lets people get started. And then you fill out the form and then and we do ask for a photo so we can, just see kind of what we're going to be looking at, and then hit submit, schedule your site visit. After we do the site visit and it's approved, then you can do the work. And then once you do the work, then you submit your receipt, and then we will send you a check for $500. So it's been a very popular program. We are asking people to complete their projects that they have intended by August 31st. So it's, kind of time is going pretty quickly, but we really want people to start clearing their land and clearing that defensible space at the earliest convenience, since it's so dry, and we really want people to get started on that. The second part of the Ready, Set, Go program is the set part, and we want people to have a wildfire action plan, which is essentially trying to plan ahead of time what you would do in an emergency. So having a list of where you would call possible evacuation sites, prescriptions that you would need to take, having a file like Gregg was talking about, a to-go bag, but having a file of your important papers like birth certificates, social security cards, those photos that are irreplaceable, but just having the plan together. So that's the set part of the Ready, Set, Go. And then the go part is when the threat of wildfire is imminent, then just go. A lot of times people are, think, well, I'm going to fight this with my little garden hose. And that doesn't always go so well if a fire is coming. And the earlier that people get started on the evacuation, if they need to evacuate in the imminent threat of wildfire, the more important it is to get going. And then having ideas of where you would evacuate to, and evacuation routes. So that's Ready, Set, Go. We have a chipper grant program. We still have funding available. We would love for people to clear their property. And please let me know if there are any questions about that.
Okay, thank you, Kari. And I guess we should clarify that this chipper program is just for the Clackamas Fire District, correct?
Yes, it's funded from the Clackamas Emergency Services and then the Clackamas Fire District #1. But that's a pretty big fire district. It's Oregon City, Milwaukee, Happy Valley, it's pretty large fire district.
Yeah, and in the next session, we're going to have maps and talk a bit more about the different fire districts. So with that, well, thank you, Kari. And I think it's time to bring on Jay and Daniel. And hopefully, Kari, you'll stick around.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. My name is Jay Wilson, the Resilience Coordinator with Clackamas County Disaster Management. We're here as county representatives to discuss how our relationship works in conjunction with the local districts, the incorporated cities, the special districts, such as the fire districts, water districts, school districts. All of those have their own unique jurisdiction and authority, but we do cover the entire county for information and support. We have day-to-day activities around community education, but we also primarily are responsible for interagency coordination with our partner agencies at the regional level, other cities, other counties, but also with the state. And if we have an emergency activation, such as the 2020 wildfires, we'll stand up an emergency operations center and do a lot of coordination for resources and information and the work that's going on the ground. What I'm showing here is kind of a mosaic of our wildfire information page. You can find it on the clackamas.us website, but if you do a backslash for wildfires, there it is. The website's at the bottom. There's there's several different tabs and information there, but I'm just highlighting these four for the sake of the space on the screen. This Be Set, Be Ready, and Go program that the state has adopted recently is something that I think people are still getting familiar with, level 1, level 2, level 3. And so there's information there on each of those 3 levels. Next to that is a tab for our public alerts system. And I saw a question that was in the Q&A already asking about how do you register. Here's the sign up right there on that tab. And you can enter a telephone number and an address associated with that number for us to be able to push alert and warning information to you for a given area when something's happening. Next to that is a wildfire evacuation map tab. In case we have an evacuation, the area will be represented there so people have a point of reference for the status of an area if there's an evacuation order that's currently underway. In 2020, at one time, at the end of that first week, the entire county was under some level, 1, 2, or 3 of an evacuation order due to the scale of the fires and the intense east winds that were blowing and multiple ignition sources that were happening across the county. And so I know one thing was mentioned earlier was about the wildland urban interface. But I would say on an event like the one we had, any ignition source, when it's that dry, that hot, and those kinds of winds, urban areas can also be dangerous places for advancing wildfires. And then on the far right, there's a tab just about animals. It's looks at planning for both your pets and livestock for evacuation, some resources to plan for, groups who help organize that. And it's good for people who have these animals in their care to lean forward way ahead of time to think about establishing a network with friends, neighbors, people who are outside of the immediate area if you have to leave, and to plan to leave early and don't wait till the last minute for the work that's involved there. Next slide, please. I just wanted to highlight under the evacuation levels, when you click on that, we have a number of different languages that we've had translations for all of this information for. It's because of so many different people who, cultural references, or I should say members of different communities of different culture who live in Clackamas County, who visit or work in Clackamas County. And so this is a resource there for more than just simply our English-speaking residents and visitors. So take advantage of that. Next slide. One other aspect that is still an emerging effort from last year's fire is the work that the county is doing with Pacific Gas and Electric, PGE. They worked with us and a number of other partners early last year to identify portions of their Hoodland area transmission and distribution system that would be vulnerable if a fire were to start. And so they made plans for what they call a PSPS, Public Safety Power Shutoff protocols, and successfully turn their system off, and I think in many cases averted an ignition source up on the Highway 26 corridor. And they've come back this year with a number of other areas. There's a very small inset map there that they're working on in the county where their vulnerable systems are. And they've been working with the State Public Utility Commission too on the administrative rules for how to pull this off and get it organized and implemented. So the main thing I would say on their behalf would be to go to this website that's listed at the bottom of the page, take a look at it. It's updated frequently, and there's a lot of good information there, especially if you live in or near one of these highlighted areas on the map. Last slide for me. And so before I turn it over to Daniel Neibauer from our department, I wanted to just briefly mention the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. This is a plan that's updated about every 5 years. It's focused on wildfire mitigation, prevention, risk reduction. And we're the kind of the holders of this plan and the conveners and facilitators when it's being updated and reviewed. It was last updated in 2018, and we've just gotten an award from FEMA for a grant that will start in the fall of this year for a 9-month period to update it again. And especially following last year's fire, we wanted to get out in front of the deadline for this plan update and bring a lot more lessons learned that came from Labor Day fires of 2020. There's a lot of interest in changes and rethinking the way that we've been doing things. We want to integrate climate change information as it refers to stresses on our forests, such as severe heat, insect infestation, drought, water shortages. All of those things add up to increasing the fire threat, and we want to call that out and pay attention to it. Every one of the districts that are listed on the right-hand column will have representation in the plan, as the current one does. There's a link at the bottom of that graphic where you can go in and take a look at that. And I would encourage any of you, if you're interested, as we get this started in the fall, it'll probably be early into the following year when we start rolling out the more direct engagement at the district level, but there's definitely room for more public engagement within each district as we get this started. Let's see, I'll have to take a look at that question and answer it more specifically maybe while Daniel is talking. So I'm going to turn it over to our interim director, Daniel Neibauer.
All right, and then Daniel, as you come on, I just want to point out with this map, as I mentioned, it's really important for everyone to kind of get familiar with this. Engaging in that community wildfire protection plan is a really good place for you to get familiar with, what your local jurisdiction is, what the fire hazards are in your neighborhood, and things that might be lining up to help you in your particular neighborhood. So this is an example of, all the different fire districts. And note the red line there. We don't have anyone from Oregon Department of Forestry on our panel tonight because they're mostly all busy fighting wildfires around the state. But there's a lot of the county that's protected by the Department of Forestry, which is the biggest firefighting agency in the state, along with the Forest Service. So it's important to get to know both your fire district and also whether you're protected by the Department of Forestry. And with that, let's see if Daniel's up here.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn, and thanks, Jay. I don't have a whole lot more to add. Jay gives a very comprehensive briefing. I do want to emphasize the public alerts and get signed up there. It's the easiest way for us to reach you, but we will be using every method that we can find to get out information if a wildfire occurs. We've definitely taken some lessons learned on how to get alerts out differently, how to get the information out differently, and hopefully how to reach other people. So we're definitely going to be working hard as that happens. And I've been answering a couple of questions in the chat, and we'll continue to happy to do so. And I'll just let us get moved along and answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay. Well, and actually, we do have a little bit of time in this session, so we might catch up on some of those questions. And we are in the next section, we're going to talk a lot about, what you can do in terms of fuels reduction and programs available. But, we'll kind of look through some of these questions. So we kind of covered the fact that your local fire district often is the first stop to see if you can get someone to come out to your property. But if they don't have that capacity, then you can next in line. Department of Forestry often can handle that, and also just contact us at the extension office, and we'll see if we can find a connection for someone to come out and help you with your particular situation. Some of these questions we're going to be addressing in the next stage here. Let's see. There's a little bit of talk about what about social media, and other, what's the best place to get the most current information about fire. Especially during a wildfire incident, I found last year that I signed up for multiple alert systems. Some work better than others, and also was looking at the Sheriff's Department Facebook page, and that turned out to be a really good resource, for kind of local information. So I don't know if you have any, advice for folks about, in addition to signing up for Clackamas County Alert, how to really be in touch with what's going on in real time.
Yeah, I think the first areas that we get information out usually are our social media pages, but we keep the wildfire page up to date and try to get information up there as quickly as possible as we know things. If we're opening shelters, the locations for those shelters, and we're going to be doing the wildfire evacuation map that people became familiar with last year and having that up there. So we try to keep that page and have a team working on that pretty much constantly as we go through the fire. So those are good sources of information. We're going to be working on doing a better job of connecting the media to those pages as well, so that those that may not be able to access the internet will have other sources of information through some more traditional media as well.
Yep. A general question is, someone's asking, how do I know what fire district I am covered by? How do people find out what their fire district is? Here's the map, but if you want to get more specific with putting your address in somewhere, how would you find that out?
The county has, I know at least one mapping program on our clackamas.us website that you can go in. I think it's still called C-Map. And you can put your address in there, and it pulls up a number of things that list, services that you're zoned for. And your fire district, like your school district or your water district, would be identified there if you don't already know.
Yeah, and the fact is that some folks are outside of local fire districts. There's even some people that fall through the cracks on our inlands that are not protected in some cases, I believe. The Department of Forestry often is the fallback for most of rural Clackamas County. But you can start with calling the Department of Forestry to find out if you're in their protection, and also then calling what you think might be the nearest fire station and find out what they can tell you about how you're covered if you don't find this online. There was another question, I think, along all the roads. The roads, highways are often a real source of ignitions from vehicles or careless people perhaps. And we're concerned about the fuels that are alongside the roads, especially after the ice storm. What can you tell us about the county's program for cleaning up along county roads? I noticed in my neighborhood, after we all cleaned up the debris in front of each of our properties, the county did come through and clean up the rest of it on my particular road. How is that going around the county?
So I can talk, go ahead, Jay.
Well, I was just going to say, we're still working on a lot of the hazard tree removal from the fire. I think there's still work going on with the tree debris removal that was going on following the ice storm. And there's some complicated processes for the fire, especially because there's a lot of state aid that's coming in on top of local assistance that the cities and the county are doing. But it's a huge amount of work, and a lot of that debris does pose threat for fuels on the ground.
It's a continuing work in progress.
Continuing work, yes. Daniel may have more to add.
Sure, I can talk. There's a handful of different I guess, operations going on to do that. The wildfire is the biggest, and ODOT is going through, and they will be going through county roads too, and removing hazardous trees from the right of way to help make sure that they don't fall and create dangers. But PGE is also going around by their lines and making sure that trees are not to the point where they can hurt and break the lines. They're doing that. A lot of the ice storm work has been completed already for the county roads. It's been completed, and there may be a couple cities still working on it, but I think almost everybody's done from the ice storm. But the looking for identifying and taking down of hazardous trees in the county right away will likely go through at least September, if not longer, because there's a lot of damaged trees out there.
Right. Pertaining to alerts, somebody put in the Q&A that they use Pulse Point. That's an app. And something I put on it gives you local emergency calls and lets you know about things. So that's another thing that folks could look for. As I mentioned, multiple alert system doesn't hurt. And I don't know if you have any comments about Pulse Point. Are you familiar with that, Daniel?
I'm not very familiar with it.
Okay.
I get my pages and alerts directly from ZCOM, so I don't use
Okay.
Pulse Point.
Okay. One other question I noticed is someone said, well, what if I have a propane tank that's out of sight and I want to let the firefighters know that I have one? Maybe one of the fire district folks could answer. I mean, in general, what's the advice about propane tanks? And then if there's one inside a barn, in this case, how do they alert firefighters so they know there's a propane tank?
I know Scott Kline had his hand raised to answer a question just a minute ago. I don't know if he's still available or not.
Yeah, if you're there, Scott, go ahead.
Usually what I recommend for propane tanks that you are keeping in barns or outbuildings is to let us know when we come in for an emergency. You can, if it's a large amount of material at that point, contact your local fire district ahead of time, and they can actually flag the information into the 911 center CCOM for us. So when that address comes up, the information is available to the firefighters as they're responding to see what type of incident they're going to. The other question Jake answered was, yes, the CMAP program through Clackamas County GIS is a great resource to figure out what fire district you're in. There's several of them. I'm kind of in that in-between area. One of them, I just typed an answer for Hoodland Fire District. Milepost 32 on Highway 26 is the start of our fire district, which is East Terra Fern, East Beatty Road, kind of in the middle of Cherryville Hill. And we go all the way to the Highway 2635 junction. There is a section that is east and south down in an area called Wampanesha, which is not protected by any fire districts. And that is ODF only protected.
Very good. Well, I think we'll move on to our next session and bring it. We're going to look at moving forward for better fire preparedness. And as just an introduction to that, I just want to remind folks that for the education side, our OSU fire program has developed a very comprehensive website for helping you look at what do you do before a wildfire to prepare, during a wildfire, and after a wildfire. And particularly, one of the most important things for us is to look at our home itself or the buildings. And it really starts with that. And we have a lot of resources that you can use to just start on your own with your own checklists without even getting a professional out there. There's a lot of details that you can just look at using these checklists. And this is on that before a wildfire site. So there's your own home assessment checklist, and you can get started so that you're more ready and more defensible when the firefighters might have to show up. And a reminder that it's the embers in the air, actually firebrands blowing through the air, that are the most important cause of the house catching on fire. So even if you've treated the dead vegetation within 30 feet, the embers can catch your house on fire. And that's the most common way that buildings are caught on fire and how it spreads building to building. So there's a lot to look at in that home assessment of the home itself. And for instance, someone was asking about mesh screens, recommendations for that. And I just point out that the home preparation, even in the midst of the worst case scenario, these extreme east winds, driven fire, one home burns and another one doesn't, and what makes the difference? And it often comes down to that home's resistance to those embers, and and little leaves in the gutters or leaves in the corners or something under the house that is ignitable through the crawl space. So there's a lot to do. And a home like this one in the middle of the worst fire was built with every detail to be fire resilient, and it survived that fire even though everything around it burned. So that's something that we'll be talking about, not only just the vegetation, but the home itself. With that, I'd like to ask our next panel, Kim Galland and Lisa Kilders, to help us get started on programs and more assistance to help you get prepared for fire in your home landscape in your neighborhood.
Did you want me to go first, Glenn?
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Okay. My name is Kim Galland. I work with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We're part of the United States Department of Agriculture. We oversee the voluntary programs that are funded by the Farm Bill. So normally, most of our work is done with agricultural producers, but we do forestry work, non-industrial private forest landowners. We're size neutral, so we will work on anything 1 acre on up. I don't think you could really have a forest on less than an acre, but I don't know, it might challenge the definition. Most of our work is going to be focused on the prevention or risk reduction of lowering your fuels so that if a fire does come through, it has less risk and can reduce the damage to your property and maybe save some of those structures. We are very good at prevention and not very good at reaction because our programs move very slowly. We go on a fiscal year basis. So we get a pot of money in the fall and then we have pretty much about 12 months to spend that. But we have application ranking periods that, and if an event falls in between those two, there's a limited chance that we could request emergency funds for limited practices, but most of our work is going to be best helping you prevent the damage to your property and acres. We are also co-located with another USDA agency. It's called the Farm Service Agency. Typically, they are a little bit better about emergency response. The Labor Day fires, Darcy Glasgow went and asked for extra money for the Emergency Forest Restoration Program. And that is specifically designed to come in after an event to help you replant those acres and to prep those acres so that they can be replanted. Again, they have to go all the way up to Congress and national in order to request those funds. So it moves a little bit slowly, but it can move faster than we can. So that's an option for after the fire, and NRCS is before the fire. Some of the things that we're going to focus on is helping you develop a forest management plan. We can do that either in-house through one of our own foresters. We can help you develop it on your own with just some technical assistance. If you've got some background in forest management or forest practices, there's a lot of skilled folks out there, and sometimes we just tell you what words to plug into the plan so that it matches our jargon and resource concerns and other internal things. And then the other thing, we could also help you find a forester that would do it for you and then cost share on what it would cost to get that forest management plan from a professional forester. We call those professional foresters that we have on hand technical service providers. We have a short list of people that have gone through our certification process to meet our standards, and we can write a contract to help you do that forest management plan. After you get the forest management plan, it's basically a prescription for actions that need to take place on your landscape in order to meet your objectives. One of your objectives is probably going to be fuels reduction. So that's probably going to involve things like brush management, which is getting rid of blackberry, Scotch broom, underlying crowded conditions. There's forest stand improvement, which there's a whole range of things that can happen under that practice, but generally it's pre-commercial thin. Or in the case of overgrown Christmas tree stands, it's a pretty drastic thin. And then we also pair that with a woody residue treatment, which is removing that woody residue so that it's no longer a fuel. In the past, our preferred method was kind of a lop and scatter because we had enough moisture and long windows where the woody residue could decompose. We are now changing our mind about that because we no longer have a lot of those rainy days that help melt that woody residue into the ground and recycle the organic matter. We're looking into chipping, shredding, hauling off site, and then eventually I think we'll actually have something along the lines of a prescribed burn. But as a federal agency, we're very leery about prescribed burns and the liability that goes along with that. So that's going to be a long road, but we'll get there. Other things that can happen after the fire, maybe it's a couple of years, and erosion on the slopes has impacted your forest roads. It's plugged some culverts, things like that. We can help repair those roads. In limited cases, we might be able to help you repair those culverts. Trying to think of anything else. I think that's pretty much it for what NRCS can do. If you have any questions, I'm almost always here. Things have been kind of hectic. We just moved into the new office with their Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District partners. But if I don't answer your phone call right away, I will get back to you in like a day or two, and I'm pretty responsive on emails. So always happy to come out and walk around in the woods and talk to you about what your concerns are, and different ways to apply for our programs. Or if our program doesn't fit for you, then we'll help you find something that does.
Thank you, Kim. And I should point out, if you can hang around a little longer, we have a couple of folks that just have good examples of how they've utilized the various programs and done work on their land. And Kim has been a big part, I think, for both of our examples. I think with that, Kim, I'll go ahead and go to your partner there with the Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District, if Lisa's available to come up. Very good. And you're both in the same building now.
Yeah, it's cool. Can you see me?
Yes, I see you.
Oh, good. Okay. So my name is Lisa Kilders, and I work for Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District. We are a local special district. We provide education and technical assistance to those living in Clackamas County. And whenever we can, we try to help with financial assistance or trying to find grants. But we are not regulatory, and all of our assistance is free. So that's really cool. We're not fire experts, but we do help people with natural resource issues. And as far as helping people become more resilient to wildfire, we provide information on invasive weeds, which can be ladder fuels. So anytime you can control your invasive weeds, you're reducing that possibility, plus helping to maintain a healthier property or forest. We also help with streamside areas, reducing invasive weeds there, stabilizing banks, and restoring native vegetation, which is always helpful. And then we always help with erosion. In addition to manure management, mud management, irrigation efficiency, all kinds of things that we work on normally. Erosion is a biggie that many people took advantage of after the last fires this last fall. And we provide information on stabilizing seeding, the best time to seed and seed mixes, planting, and also on emergency practices for times like last fall when it was a very odd time of the year after things had finally settled down. It was too late to seed. So there were a lot of practices that we tried to help people with, wattles and and different ways to keep the soil on your property and not going downstream. We do also do site visits. We can help triage natural resource land management issues. And if it's an issue that we cannot help with, that we don't have expertise in, we try to help you find other services that may help you. For some, we did have OWEB money last fall after the fires. And so sometimes OWEB can hit up things like this in an emergency, but normally our OWEB grants are for restoration work and habitat improvement. But, you know, it's always a good idea to call and see what's available, as with the federal possibilities for grants and financial assistance. And give us a call. We're available.
Yeah, and now you have one-stop shopping. So if you go to the building there for the Soil and Water Conservation District, as well as NRCS in Clackamas County, it's really easy to find, just right at the bend and Beaver Creek, after the bend and Beaver Creek Road, heading out from Oregon City. And so you can look at the, you know, the service center here is kind of, again, one-stop shopping, and also get folks to come to your land and see where you live.
That's true. But our office isn't open to the public yet, so please call ahead and make a reservation.
Okay, the one-stop shopping is on the phone for now then.
Right on the phone, email, and then we can come to you, but we aren't quite open for drop-ins yet.
Okay, very good. But you can do field visits.
Yes.
All right, and so do we here in the OSU Extension Service. Thank you, Lisa and Kim. I'm going to go next to some examples. So Steve Rain, are you there?
I am, Glenn.
To tell some of your story. So here's an example of a local landowner that we worked with for years that is happy to share his long experience with managing his own land, in particular, focusing on wildfire resilience here. So go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Glenn, and thanks everybody for being here. And I'm happy to share what little I know about taking care of the woods. I have a home and 200 acres of forest land that are located in kind of a remote corner of Clackamas County. And over the years, I've been very concerned about fire issues. So, I've been slowly but steadily working towards trying to make my property more fire resistant. You know, there's no fireproofing it when those big wind events come, but there's some things you can do to make it so that you'll be more likely to have your forest survive a fire. One of the main things I've done from the get-go is to deal with invasive species. As some of the other folks said, you know, blackberries, Scotch broom, reed canary grass can be horrible fire accelerators and can carry a fire and get it really hot so it goes into a crown. So dealing with those things is critical. Also improving forest health by pre-commercial thinning and dealing with diseased and dying trees. Those are another way to make your forest more fire resistant. And then also, of course, defensible space around the house. We've already talked about that a little bit. And then another really critical part of it is proper forest road management. I think that is something that every forest landowner can help out by making their roads accessible and usable by fire equipment. And to do that, I've done two different things. Number one is to do significant limbing up along those roads, and then also significant mowing of the roads ahead of fire season. You know, it's mowing is a very great tool for fire prevention, but you don't want to be that knucklehead that does it too late in the year and ends up starting a fire with their mower. So for me, I try to focus my mowing in April, May, and early June, and then just kind of stop. but having a significant mowed green buffer along each side of the road is going to help make that a potential forest fire break. And so those are kind of the main things that I've been working on in order to be more fire resilient. And in order to do those things, it's just me doing it. So that's how it started out. But I've been able to enlist a lot of help, and from people like Kim and the NRCS, also from the SWCD, and from the Oregon Department of Forestry. Those are all great sources of help for landowners to improve their forest health, and in so doing also make their place a little more fire resistant. So some of the programs with Kim, I've worked on EQIP programs for forest thinning. They also had money available for limbing up along roads, and for invasive species removal. So, and once again, I'd like to reiterate what Kim said about, in order to access those funds, it's really important to have a forest management plan. A forest management plan doesn't have to be a huge document, but you need to have some. You can't get where you're going unless you have a map, I guess. And so a forest management plan helps with that, and having professional foresters come out to your property to discuss your goals and your concerns is a very helpful process. So that's been a huge help for me, getting a forest management program in place, and then using that to kind of set the roadmap forward for how to improve my forest and how to access some of the help that is available from the NRCS and from the Oregon Department of Forestry and from the SWCD. So those are some kind of a general overview. I think I'd like to reiterate something that a couple of people have said earlier, and that is to be in communication with your local fire district. I'm in the Sandy Fire District, and I've had one of the leaders of that group come out and drive our roads with me. I'm in a very remote part of the county, and our property it's not like there's it's easy to find. So I had them come out and drive the roads with me. I showed them where the water sources are, talked to them about defensible space and so forth. And one thing I didn't mention earlier is I talked about a little bit about the NRCS programs that I've used. I've also been able to access programs through the Oregon Department of Forestry. And unfortunately, they don't have anybody with us tonight, but it's worthwhile to reach out to your stewardship forester to discuss other potential help programs. One of them is they have a program to help people write forest management programs or plans. And they also, in the past, they've had fuels reduction programs, which was able to access on some of my much larger scale projects. Now those funds have waxed and waned over the years, so I can't speak to what's available right now through the Oregon Department of Forestry, but it's definitely worthwhile to reach out to your local stewardship forester if you have forest land, and they could help you out with some of the accessing some of the federal dollars that they might manage as well. So I guess, and one of the things that they actually did with the Oregon Department of Forestry is they had a inmate crew from the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, the women's prison forest fire fighting crew, came out off fire season and helped me do defensible space work. They brought a chipper out and about a 8-woman crew, and with chainsaws and so forth, and they did a wonderful job of helping me develop improve the defensible space around my home. So there's all kinds of programs out there. It's just really important to reach out to your professional people, the people that we've heard from tonight. Glenn's a great resource. Kim's an excellent resource at our NRCS, and your local stewardship forester can really help too. So if you live in the rural area and you have some forest land or ag land, definitely reach out to these people in order to get help to do to make it so you can be much more effective and much more efficient with your forest improvement. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer questions, or if there's anything I forgot, Glenn, please prompt me.
No, thank you, Steve. It's always good to hear the story from somebody on the ground and in reality what you've done over the years. And all you have to do is ask. And Steve is a good example of that over the years. He's connected with a lot of different sources. I've been out to the land, I think, twice. And it really helps to get a lot of different input from professionals that are available. You mentioned the Department of Forestry funds for fuels reduction. I just want to say in general, there's a lot more attention and funding coming our way in the years coming because of the increased issues with fire and hazards. So even if it's not available today, it could be available soon, and being prepared and having a plan and just putting your feelers out, is going to be important in the future. And I know just in the last legislative funding session, there's a lot more funding that's going to be coming for these kinds of things. So thanks, Steve. If you'd stick around in case something comes up to contribute to, that would be great. And I'm going to switch to Gregg. Glenn, the other Glenn on the show tonight, Glenn Sackett, and I've got a presentation that you have prepared. So I'm going to bring that up. And while I'm doing that, actually, there was a question in the Q&A about bark chips and mulch and that kind of thing, and also fabric and stuff like that. Maybe, I don't know if any of the firefighters might say what they think about those in that defensible space within 30 feet of a home. Someone has an opinion about bark mulch and landscape fabric as far as being fire resistant material.
Those are combustible materials. So it's there is one brand of landscape fabric, FLAMAOR, Flamor, I believe is how you'd pronounce that. And they claim that it is fire resistant, but it is still made of, I believe, like some kind of plastic material that's woven mesh, but it's a felt type fabric. So maybe something about the way it's constructed helps it resist combustion, but overall bark chips would not really be considered something you'd want to put near your house, which I know is hard to swallow because that's a very common material that you would want to use. Yeah, if you're watering really well, but if power goes out and you can't water, you got to remember those things. Things dry out really quickly during wildfires, so maybe you don't want to take that risk.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. All right, Glenn, are you available to tell us your story?
I am, if you can hear me.
I can hear you, and your slideshow is up, so go ahead.
Okay,
please.
great. Thank you, Glenn. Glenn with two N's. I'm Glenn with one N. First of all, you can go to the next slide if you want. I'll start. So real quickly, I live in an area in the city of Happy Valley. We have 53 homes in our homeowners association, and we own about 5 acres of forested and grass slope green spaces, common green spaces in our HOA. I'd like to start by thanking the Extension Service, ODF, and Clackamas Fire District number 1. I've had extensive conversations and assistance from ODF and Clackamas Fire, and now I can see I need to reach out to the Extension Service and also NRCS and the Soil and Water Conservation District. I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about me. I've a 37-year retiree from the U.S. Forest Service as a soil scientist and a public affairs specialist. I'm nationally qualified Public Information Officer 1. I serve on a national fire prevention education team. I've been doing wildfire suppression, public information officer work and assignments for over 40 years. And last year, as you can see, I spent most of the summer on assignments, and I've already spent and currently in Colorado right now as I speak on a 6-week virtual and a physical assignment doing wildfire and prevention support here on the western slope of Colorado. Next slide, please. I call this Journey to Firewise because it really is a journey. And it is a process, and it's continuing. So the story I'm going to try and tell you very quickly is began in September of 2017. We moved into this community in February, and then 2017 in September, the Eagle Creek Fire was burning in the gorge. And if you remember, there were evacuation notices being implemented in East Multnomah County. We got smoked in. We were having strong east winds, dry fuels, which is actually it was a typical September as far as I can remember. And I've born and raised and grew up in Western Oregon. So, Septembers like this are very common in my mind. So I walked out on our deck and I looked around because we have green space around our home. And I just asked myself the question, is my house defensible? And the answer was no. And so that led me to decide I needed to take some action. Next slide, please. So after fast forwarding to 2019, I started what I call a top-down, bottom-up kind of a strategy. I first started contacting, I have ODFW, that's a mistake, ODF and Clackamas Fire District 1 to try to help me identify the fire risks in our neighborhood. I began working with, which was kind of the top down. I also serve on the Happy Valley Parks Advisory Committee, so I'm able to have contact and conversation with the mayor and city council. So I started talking to these folks about some of the issues that I saw out there in our suburban landscape. And then I started working right next to my home with a neighbor to start removing ladder fuels and to break up that continuity of fuel on the ground in our common green space. There's been a lot of mention about ladder fuels, and I was really happy, Glenn, to hear you talk about the role that homes play in these suburban landscapes that we have in subdivision fires, because when fires get up into the crowns of these trees and the wind is blowing and a home catches on fire, the homes then become the fuel for the next fire, the next home to burn, because the embers are blowing home to home to home, and that's what carries the fire through these subdivisions. So it's really important to look at these ladder fuels and how to keep that fire down on the ground. I got in touch with Tracy Bostrom from ODF, who then got me in touch with Kelsey DeGuire from ODF. I talked with Sean Olson, who then got me in touch with Kari. So part of this message is just to start talking to people if you're in these suburban areas where you've got a lot of resources and overlapping jurisdictions. Jumping forward then into 2020, I got on the board of I got on our landscape committee for our HOA, and then I got on the board of directors. And then at our annual meeting, I invited Tracy and Sean to come and speak to us about Firewise USA and what that was and how we could participate in that and the benefits to our community. So I was able to get 9 homeowners to commit to Firewise. And at the same time, we continued our fuel reduction work. Next slide, please. So I'm just gonna run through the steps of Firewise, and these are all outlined in the National Fire Protection Association website that I have at the end of this, the web link for that. So you need to organize, you need 8 homeowners to commit to being in a Firewise community. You need to form a board or a committee that kind of manages that the group, and then you need to define a boundary. And so what we did, as you can see on this map, we outlined the boundary of our Firewise community is the same as our homeowners association. So even though we only had 8 homeowners that were kind of strategically placed around the HOA, by making the whole HOA the boundary, as more homes and homeowners decided to participate, they could just be included without any change in the Firewise community. Next slide, please. So then we have to plan it. And what this involves is first preparing a self-assessment of your area, which I did, and our committee reviewed it. And then working through ODF, Clackamas Fire District prepared their assessment. Kari Shanklin did that. And so then those were submitted to ODF, who is Kelsey DeGuire is the coordinator. ODF developed an action plan, submitted that to NFPA, and I believe we need to be able to show at least 55 hours of volunteer work as part of the application. NFPA reviewed our application, made a decision, and in June of 2020, we were nationally recognized as a Firewise community and the first Firewise community in the city of Happy Valley. The next step then, next slide please, is to do it. And so we just continued our fuel reduction work in our green spaces. And I'll tell you this often in our case, and I think it's probably fairly common, this will normally fall upon a small group of people to do this that are committed, and that's certainly our experience. But we did start to host some outreach events. And the first one, well, let me hold off on that for just a second. So as part of this top-down strategy, being on the Parks Committee, I also am a liaison to the Happy Valley Traffic and Safety Committee. So last October, Chief Charlton and I both made presentations to the committee about our experiences, his from, of course, the district's perspective, mine from a homeowner. And we, as a result of that, the committee recommended to City Council that the City of Happy Valley start working on a fire risk assessment for the city. I've been to at least 3 different homeowners associations now and spoken with them and went out and walked their areas with them. And then last November, we also hosted a virtual community event, Firewise community event in our association. So then, as Kari mentioned, you know, we were making good progress and starting to build you know, consensus in our HOA and everything. And then February ice storm hit and kind of changed everything. So then we spent over 200 person hours of community work just opening up our sidewalks in our neighborhood. And because we sit right at kind of the top of a ridge area. So we really suffered a lot of damage and had several big trees come down, and we have these large fir trees that shed branches all over the place. So we really had a lot of debris. We lost all of our HOA street trees were also badly damaged, that we had them removed. So over the course of the next couple months, we and with the assistance of City Happy Valley with their free disposal, we dumped over 30 loads of debris at Happy Valley Park and opened up our sidewalks, and that still left all of this heavy fuel out in our green spaces and this fire load that we had out there. So then this summer, we hosted one in June and one just actually last weekend, 2 community cleanup days where we invited and partnered with the Happy Valley Boys Team Charity. We partnered with the City of Happy Valley, the Clackamas Fire District #1, Deerfield Park HOA. And so we, in those 2 weekends, we accomplished over 300 person hours worth of work, cleaning up, cutting up, dragging material from these green spaces up to the sidewalks, where then we were able to utilize the chipper grant program that Kari spoke of. And that didn't cover the cost, the whole cost, but it was very significant portion of the cost of getting at least the first weekend, first community cleanup day damage cleaned up and chipped. So I believe as of now, all of the chipping has been accomplished, and we still have more work to do, but we're making significant progress. Next slide, please. So what are we really trying to do? And there's basically 3 objectives that we're trying to accomplish. First is to reduce the threat of wildfire to our homes. And, you know, when you get into these suburban areas and residential areas that have green spaces, that 5-foot area, that immediate zone is really where you can have the most effect, I believe. Once you get out to 30 feet, then oftentimes you're in somebody else's property. So in our case, we've got these green spaces that we can be effective in, but when you've got just a basic kind of subdivision, then, you know, with the setbacks, you're probably in somebody else's backyard already at 30 feet. The second objective is we're trying to reduce the risk to firefighters. And so, you know, by reducing these ladder fuels, by trying to keep the fire out of the crown, by breaking up the fuel on the ground, it makes it safer for our emergency responders and firefighters to get in on the ground and attack any initial attack on any fires that do start. So we're trying to be cognizant of that. And then the third thing is more long-term. We're trying to increase the resiliency of our forested green spaces by restoring the native fire-tolerant species, removing invasive species, nuisance trees and plants. We have a lot of sweet cherry that has seedlings that are in our green spaces that are just occupying space and taking water and nutrients away from the larger overstory Douglas fir and big leaf maple that we have, that we're trying to increase the resiliency on. We've also the horticulturists and the arborists that I've been speaking with are actually recommending now that we start planting species that are growing well in Southern Oregon and Northern California. And so I've actually started to plant the Valley Ponderosa pine and incense cedar in our native green spaces, especially in the southerly exposures and where the sites are a little bit harsher, and some of the shrubs too, like California lilac. So we're trying to bring in some species that are going to be resilient to climate change. Next slide, please. So what else can we do? As I mentioned, I've advocated to the Happy Valley City Council. I testified before them several times, and they have decided this year to make a citywide fire risk assessment and action plan one of their priorities. They're currently working on that. They have hired a consultant to help them with that. Because if you look at an aerial view of Happy Valley, you'll see that there is a lot of forested area within the city limits. You have Scouters Mountain to the east, Mount Talbert to the south, and then these green spaces that are mostly owned by HOAs that lace and meander their way through and are connected to these larger spaces. So in an event like last fall, where we simply got lucky in Happy Valley, we didn't have multiple starts. If we could see a catastrophic type event if the conditions are right. The second thing I've been recommending and been we've had some success with Clackamas Fire District as their chipper program, but I've been advocating to the city to, as part of this risk assessment and action plan, to also start looking at some micro grant programs to help fund neighborhoods in these fuel reduction projects like the chipper program. That's a big challenge is what do you do with the material? How do you get rid of it? How do you dispose of it? One of the challenges I found early on was the county wildfire mitigation plan. The scale of that really does not address the neighborhood scale that we work at, and so I would like to see with the updates that will be occurring, to have the scale change so that it's really more effective at the level that we are working at in these green spaces between our homes, and to identify the hazard there. The city, I also we're talking with them about, and as part of their assessment, they're also looking at updating city codes to allow more efficient, effective fire risk reduction work to take place on larger scales. And they're also looking at code for new homes and new developments to use more native landscaping and resilient landscaping in those new subdivisions, so that 20 years from now, when those things start to mature, we don't have another problem to start to undertake. And then the city has also been working with the state to implement a ban on backyard burning. That's in process. And like I mentioned, just continue working to restore our landscapes to increase their resiliency to climate change and also fire resiliency. Next page, please. And then, so finally, just the link there to the NFPA for public education, and also Firewise USA. There are a lot of really good resources on there. There's a very good video on there that shows the science and the research that's been done by the Forest Service Experimental Lab on home ignitions and how the embers ignite homes adjacent to one home and how it carries in the wind. And this has all been documented through research now, and there's a very, very good video that illustrates that. And then, like I said, I am available. I have been made myself available to help other neighborhoods in Happy Valley to try and start down this path. And there are a couple other HOAs, I believe, that are on the journey to Firewise as well. So that's it, and thank you. I'll be happy to try and entertain any questions.
All right, thank you, Glenn. So we need more and more stories like this, because this is really what we need to do throughout a lot of our neighborhoods. So I'm really glad to get this example and share it. It's been a good long session. I really appreciate all the panelists. I think we ought to wrap it up and just encourage everybody to start your own path here and get back in touch with us and seek assistance where needed.